So here we are talking about blob storage. Blob storage is the platform as a service. Specifically, if you will, it is responsible for allowing you to free yourself of the infrastructure headache of IaaS, infrastructure as a service, as it relates to dealing with storage. Think of it this way. You are interested in storing information that you can retrieve quickly. Isn't that the case? And the retrieval of storage and storing of information that you want to do may be in vast amounts. Let me give you an example of what I mean by a vast amount. Think about transactions that take place on any given day for an airline. Maybe it's hundreds of thousands, correct? Hundreds of thousands of transactions that are taking place for airlines with respect to their schedules and customers and where they're traveling. If you wanted to log every customer, every transaction, every place that an airline was going, and every single moment throughout the day, it would be great to have blob storage for the purposes of the capability simply not to worry about the infrastructure needed to house all that information. The days of I am out of space and I will need to shut down my server operations to provide somebody with more storage are simply gone. That is not acceptable when you're dealing with production. Azure Blob Storage is meant specifically for that. Large, unstructured storage that is scalable, immediately and dynamically scalable, without having to worry about the infrastructure under the hood. When you're thinking about storage options available in Azure, think of it this way. We have storage options that are accessible via REST API, and those include your queue storage, your blob storage, and your table storage. And then there are storage devices that are designed for Azure VMs, your disk storage and your file storage. Well, if I'm just going to be responsible for provisioning images, for example, and video, for example, and maybe I'm responsible for vast amounts of logs that I will be storing on my particular storage device, I really want blob storage for that purpose. I don't want table store or queue storage. I don't want file storage or disk storage as they're associated with VMs. I want blob storage so that it can take care of my images, my video logging, and perhaps even streaming data. So blob storage is meant for unstructured data, large amounts of data, maybe dealing with pages and blocks, like you would in a database, for example. Queues and queue storage are for queues. It's very reliable, something like if you were dealing with Microsoft Message Queue. File storage are meant for file shares, legacy systems using server message blocks to accomplish its task. Then there's disk, which is premium, very high I/O, and meant for virtual machines. But here we are looking at and focused on blob storage. As far as architecture goes, blob storage comes down to these three specific categories. There are block blobs, which are used for storing text and binary files, maybe large images or videos. Maybe it's backups. Maybe it's archive. There are append blobs, which are used for logging and monitoring data. There are page blobs, which are mainly used for disks like VM disks and Azure SQL. So block, append, and page blobs. Working with blob storage is quite simple. You create a storage account with which you create blob storage. You specify a blob container, kind of like a folder, and within the folder you place your blobs, which is essentially where the files are. So it goes from your account, your storage account, to blob storage, which is what you would specify that you want to use, and then to a container, like a folder, and then to your blobs, which are files within the folder. Let me elaborate my explanation, or the business need for blob storage. Remember I said that this is platform as a service. You're essentially purchasing storage without having to worry about the underlying infrastructure. No need to worry about operating system or hardware or patching the hardware, worrying about running out of disk space, worrying about if the disk space is slow, if you will, latency issues don't exist, worrying about if you want to scale the storage because you want to make it closer to the user, because you want to make it larger, because you want to allow for faster transactions, faster response times, maybe because you want it to serve for the purposes of streaming media or video or audio or images. You know how large they can get. How about backups? How about large logs or archives? How about images of machines? Those things can get very, very large. Unstructured storage, platform as a service, Azure Blob Storage is the answer.